Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are here in the beautiful city of Netanya. I think I'm in Netanya. I've been all over on the train this morning.
Yeah. You're a tour of Israel by Israel trains. Yeah, it's good. No, it's Netanya.
So all the way from the beautiful capital, Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the Jewish people, traveling down from the cold Jerusalem to the nice weathered. I get to wear my
short sleeves, sunny seaside weather.
I'm enjoying the sun here, Barry. I'm with a wonderful guest, Barry Shaw. If you haven't heard of him, Google him, research him, check out his stuff. The guy's dynamite. He's dynamite when it comes to Israel diplomacy for people around the world, talking about the big issues, BDS, politics in Israel, in Europe, etc., and how that affects both Israel and your countries in Europe or the United States, Canada. I think you're well versed in a lot of those. Geopolitical issues.
I have a following with a lot of supporters in a lot of European countries, in the States, in South Africa, in Australia, New Zealand, a lot of places.
So, by the way, if you're not already following him, go. You see the link there. I put his name. Follow him on Facebook. If you want to learn anything about Israel, you want to learn anything about how to defend Israel, how to stand up for Israel, how to explain the hard issues of two-state solution. Palestinian Palestinian claims to the land, etc., etc., etc. You have to follow this guy because he's the person to go to. So that's why I'm here today, to discuss with you some of the big issues. One of the main issues, if you notice by the title, is the danger of Jeremy Corbyn to the state of Israel. Why is he a danger? Why is he a threat to the Jewish people? Barry Shaw, can you please explain to us?
There are grave concerns in Great Britain right now about the rise of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. We've got to start out by saying something here. The Labour Party in Great Britain is the major opposition party in Her Majesty's government. That's how they look at it. It's not some fringe group, it's not some crazy, it's not some neo-Nazi group or whatever. It is the mainstay of British politics, quite often in power. And yet, since Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party about three years ago.
From what I researched, it was September 2015.
About that sort of time, correct, right?
Which, by the way, for those who don't know, historically September is where you have a lot of very anti-Israel, anti-Semitic historic events happening. Little fun fact.
Yeah, except if you're in places like London and other places in America, it's happening throughout the year, not just confined to 1 month of the year. But unfortunately, two things have happened since he became leader. First of all, he's doubled the membership in the British Labour Party.
Wow.
And at the same time, there has suddenly been emerging, the last 2 years at least, a most massive amount of anti-Semitism at all levels of the Labour Party. You have to realise the politics in Britain is one of what's called constituency politics. In other words, the country is divided up into regions and towns and sections of towns, districts, and they appoint their own individual members of parliament. Yeah, these people are associated with one of the political parties, the main ones being Labour, Conservative, Lib Dems, but there are other parties as well, and they vote for a person and a party.
So basically, if I understand what you're saying,
it's almost like
I'm ignorant to this. I'm learning from him. Okay, don't feel like this is over your head, because it's over my head. So
it's closer to your midterms in America, I would say, where you vote in your state or towns or parts of the state for your members of House of Representatives.
So local reps.
Local representation.
Of communities, right?
Right.
More or less.
Right. But you still, each one represents the party.
Okay.
And so in the last general elections, for instance, the Conservative had more members in Parliament than the Labour Party, so they take power.
Okay. So right now, who's in power?
The Conservative Party.
Conservative movement, so to speak.
They're in power.
Okay.
But however, with people who may know a little bit about Brexit, this is they had a referendum where the British public had to vote whether to remain in Europe or to leave Europe. And because mainly because of migration, they decided to leave Europe. This had a lot to do
So the
also.
people voted, we don't want to be...
We don't want to be in part of the European Union. We don't like the collective decisions of unelected bureaucrats in Brussels who decide, you know, what we can grow, what we can make, how much we charge for our stuff, where we can fish, where we can't fish, and things like this.
Which is European Union.
Which is the European Union,
yep.
right? Which is basically an unelected grouping. They don't want to be ruled by Brussels. They felt they were losing control of their country. And this was made worse with the tsunami of migrants that were flooding into Europe and making their way into Britain and other places. And they didn't like being told by their leaders, well, we're a multicultural country, we should allow them in, we go for diversity and everything, because they didn't like what they were seeing within their country, and they voted to leave. But unfortunately, the Conservative Party have made a mess of the negotiations with the European Union, and the country becomes sort of disenfranchised. And
because the people voted, let's leave.
Let's leave.
But the government said, oh, we veto that opinion of the people.
No. They went to negotiate, but they negotiated terms that were being dictated to them by the Europeans, and the people were saying, well, we want to leave anyway. Why are we leaving on terms that we don't like?
Right.
You know, go back and do it again. And quite frankly, the disarray has led to a place where everybody in Britain has been so fed up with the negotiations. And look on the Theresa May, who's leading the Conservative government, as a failure. We voted to leave, and let's leave. But there are so many conditions being imposed. In the meantime, like most socialist governments, or even members of the opposition, the Jeremy Corbyn Labour Party have been promising all these freebies, as if nobody has to pay for them.
Nobody. It comes
free education, free healthcare, free this, free that, for
the sky.
the other.
It just rains on us, right?
Right.
Benefits rain on people.
But coming on to topic for us, what is happening is that the stain of anti-Semitism has erupted out of the Labour Party at all levels, both at national level and even at local level.
Right.
And where
which is really what's troubling here.
Where it really stems from.
I listened to your speech the other night, by the way.
In Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem, Mr. Shaw gave
Barry Shaw.
Barry. Yeah. I say Mr. Shaw. I learned this from the good folks down south, how to, you know.
Right.
But so you were up in Jerusalem. You gave a very chilling presentation. I mean, chilling. What you told the audience there, and you weren't just speaking your opinion.
No.
You have done your research. I mean, I saw the stuff that you provided. You're giving literal quotes from these people, not interpretations. Okay, which is a big difference, guys.
Yeah.
What your media tells you, what the mainstream loves to kind of throw at you, is their interpretation of reality, not reporting what was said, what was done.
Right.
You reported to these folks, basically, per se, in your presentation, what was said and was being done.
Yeah.
And it's chilling. To me, it's much more scary than what Hitler did, with all due respect.
Well,
Hitler did not even say those things.
I mean, the anecdotes I give you are what's being said by members of the Labour Party today, and it's what they believe. For instance, I quoted a councillor, this is somebody who belongs to the local Labour Party in a place called Luton, who said that he described Hitler as the greatest man in history. This is one. A councillor in Oxford, right, said, for instance, that compared Israel to Nazi Germany, which is one of the tropes of anti-Semitism. It's one of the giveaways.
Right.
A councillor in a place called Bognor made a mistake because he posted, I think it was on Twitter or Facebook, a photograph of a child that had been killed in Syria and accused Israel of being child killers, positioned it as if it was a Palestinian child. It wasn't. But he put it out, making out that Israel were child killers.
Because who cares about the facts, right?
But he put on his tweet or his post what it was, Hitler had a point. That's what he wrote.
Wow. You understand what that's saying, guys? You understand what that's saying?
And he's saying that Zionists, not Jews, he used the word Zionist, which is the same thing, should be put in concentration camps. This is what's happening. So
let me understand something, because I'm a little confused. On the one hand, they're saying we're Nazi Germany. On the other hand, they're saying we need to be put in concentration camps. Which is it? Right. We're going to put ourselves in a concentration camp? It's the irrationality of anti-Semitism. I want to tell you, one of the arguments that was going on in Britain a long time
was that the Jewish Leadership Council in Great Britain insisted that the Labour Party adopt the official definition of anti-Semitism.
Wow.
And part of the official definition, that part of the official definition of anti-Semitism is you making comparisons to Israel and Nazi Germany and the Jews and the concentration camp. That in itself is anti-Semitic.
Right.
Right. So comparing Israel as being somehow Nazi and Nazi Germany and using Nazi symbolism is part of anti-Semitism. However, the Labour Party contested that, led by Jeremy Corbyn.
So they didn't like.
He didn't like the
definition.
He didn't like any connection with Israel or Zionism to be included in what has been adopted as the official definition of anti-Semitism.
Because it singles them out.
Yeah, it singles out what Jeremy Corbyn intends to do if he becomes Prime Minister, particularly against Israel. And he doesn't want to be hampered by the stigma of saying or doing anything which would be officially conceived as being anti-Semitic.
You know that this reminds me of the United Nations has a body, you know, that is supposed to combat terrorism. I forget the official name, but you can research this, and it's insane. They to date have not come up with a definition of what is terrorism, because that's the thing. The United Nations have representatives from nations who are terrorist nations, who have committed crimes against humanity, atrocities, you name it, genocides. So of course they're not going to shoot themselves in the foot as they're part of this, you know, definition of what is terrorism. And so to me, I see the same game that's being played in England.
Okay.
It's like, we're not going to define something that's going to end up singling us out, of course.
Except, let's not forget, keep in mind that Britain, because it was part of the European Union, have in fact adopted the resolution that defines Hamas as an officially banned terrorist organization.
Which is
and also, this is where the nonsense comes in, also parts of Hezbollah, what they call the military wing of Hezbollah, is defined as a terrorist organization.
Okay.
The military wing, the ones where they raise the money and everything to give to Hezbollah, that's not terrorist, it's like a social service unit.
Right,
despite the fact there's something going on in Germany right now, which is to call all of Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. Right. And the reason that this is important comes back again to people like Jeremy Corbyn, who does not look on Hamas as a terrorist organization.
Well, I saw the proof of what you
showed. Yeah, okay, because for instance, he has met with Hamas terrorists repeatedly. He came to Israel. He talks about wanting an open debate about Israel and Zionism, but he's never had an open debate. It's been always been a closed ears debate, open mouth, his mouth, and one-way direction, but no open debate on anything to do with, for instance, the Palestinians. He came to Israel. He never went to the Knesset. He never met any of the Israeli ministers, the Jewish ministers. He went to Hebron and met the Hamas representatives. He went to Ramallah and met with Hamas and Fatah representatives. He's invited Hamas representatives into the British Parliament at a time when Hamas is designated as a terrorist organisation against Parliament, by the British government, and against British parliamentary rules. And he's invited not once but twice to Parliament.
Now, just to give some context, okay, for our audience, Hebron, this is where some of the hardliner terrorists come from. This last very unfortunate, horrific attack of the young girl, Ori, that was murdered, raped. The terrorist came from Hebron. He then went and hid in Ramallah, if I remember correctly, and that's where they caught him. Why Ramallah? Because that's where you have
his safe haven.
Safe haven for terrorists.
What they call it in America, safe cities, sheltered cities, whatever.
So think about this. So he's gone. This Mr. Corbyn has gone to these locations that are where the terrorists' hideouts are, where their headquarters are. met with terrorists themselves. It's not that he went there and met with Palestinian leaders. Yeah. He met with terrorists.
Yeah.
I mean, known terrorist or leaders.
In fact, two of the people he invited over there, one of them had said that he wished to be a suicide bomber. Of course,
he doesn't want to be.
Hamas terrorists and Fatah terrorist leaders, political or terrorists, always say they wish to be suicide bombers, but they never go themselves. They always send other people to blow themselves up, and not those.
And that's code for, I wish for you to go blow yourself up, not me.
And another one had openly said that if the Royal Navy, the British Royal Navy, intercepted any Iranian ships bringing supplies or weapons or whatever to Gaza, to Hamas, that these ships should be attacked. And yet, despite the fact he's saying that British Royal Navy ships should be attacked, he's sitting in Parliament hosted by Jeremy Corbyn.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing?
But you've got to understand the background of Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn is what I call an old-style Soviet-type socialist, hard socialist.
Yeah.
He supports regimes in like Castro in Cuba and Chavez and what's going on today in Venezuela. Those are the people he adores, right?
Right.
But at the same time, his birthplace, he came out of what's called the Socialist Workers' Party, which is, it's a communist party, it's a Marxist party. But that was his nurturing, this is what he came out of. Now you've got to understand, the Socialist Workers' Party is still active in Britain today. The Communist Party is still active in Britain today. Members of the Socialist Workers' Party support Corbyn. They will never become members of the Labour Party, because they are politically, ideologically associated far, even to the further left of the Labour Party. Right. But for them, Corbyn represents their aims, their ideology and their aims. What is Corbyn's ideology? It sounds like something from the 50s. He's anti-American imperialism.
Right.
He's anti-European colonialism and British colonialism, and is against capitalism. And what for him encapsulates all this are Jews and Zionists. Jews because of the money, Zionists because they're supported and propped up, he says, by the American imperialists. And he tries to present Israel as being created out of a European type of colonialism, which is nonsense in historical terms.
Great Britain today is not that great. You're just a little island.
But
just
look
a
at
little island. I'm trying to see the proof of what he's saying. But where's that being exercised? Where are you imperializing? Who are you imperializing?
Well, he feels a guilt conscience of the British Empire, for instance, which he looks on as a crime.
It's long gone.
He looks at the British approving on the Balfour Declaration and the declaration in support of the Jewish natural home of the people here in Palestine as a crime. And they've said so openly.
Because what it was. In other words, so the bottom line is, anything from his government, both past and present, that's supportive of the Jewish people, the indigenous Jewish people's right to their homeland, that's a crime.
Yeah.
But if it was something other that was in support of his ideas, oh, he would say they're awesome, right?
No, but I want to tell you, when, for instance, you heard me say at the talk, for instance, when we were being bombed by hundreds of rockets from Hamas in Gaza,
right.
And there was a huge march that took place in Britain with about 18,000 people. They were marching between Hamas flags through the streets of London to Trafalgar Square. People who've been to London know what that is.
Sure.
And they were addressed by Jeremy Corbyn. And do you know what he said to them? He said, in our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians.
Huh.
This was because Israel was starting to retaliate to the hundreds of rockets fired into Israeli civilian centers. Now, what's weird about this statement about being in our thousands and our millions, we're all Palestinians? At the same time, Assad in Syria was barrel-bombing his own people, including Palestinians who were living in places like the Yarmouk refugee camp and other places.
Yeah.
3,000 Palestinians were killed by Assad. But Corbyn has never said, in our thousands and our millions, we are all Syrians. Never said it. On the contrary, he spoke up in Parliament against any British intersection into the war in Syria. don't go there.
Yeah, don't
not Syria, not Lebanon, not anywhere else.
Well, what about
But
Jordan?
against Israel, he would have intersection.
And what about Jordan? See, if you want to be consistent, Great Britain at the time created the modern state of Jordan,
Yeah.
which is one of the greatest failures of that imperial period of British history, where they created nations and they drew lines
Yeah.
and created a mess.
Right.
With all due respect.
Right.
Love it or hate it, at the end of the day, they were the ones that were in charge of the region.
Right.
They created borders and lines and what have you. And if you look at the greatest atrocity to Palestinians, in my personal opinion, is what we see in Jordan. Jordan is a state in which the majority of the people are so-called Palestinian, and they're ruled by a Hashemite king who is a minority.
Probably,
less than 20%, just to give
probably
you
about
numbers.
10-12%. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
going down because, of course,
Right, right.
becoming more.
Right.
So think about this: they can't travel around. They don't get passports. They can't travel. They can't work certain jobs
Yeah.
that are saved for the privileged.
Right.
Hashemites, those
Right.
are close to the plate, so to speak. Imagine living in a country where your people group are the majority, but you're ruled by a super minority. Where's that cry to those Palestinians?
I want to tell you, a lot of what I do, you know this,
Yeah.
is what we call in Hebrew hasbara, which is helping people who want to speak up and support Israel and need some facts and information.
Yeah.
And when I'm talking to some of the audiences or workshops for students or whatever, I make this, it sounds strange at first, when you're contending with what we call the BDS activists. These are
Right.
boycotters of Israel, the haters of Israel, the pro-Palestinian activists or whatever.
Yeah.
A lesson for some of you people watching: if you want to speak up for Israel, just as a notion, take Israel out of the equation. Just listen what these people are talking about. Like Daron, you mentioned before about what's happening in Jordan.
Yeah.
You'll hear all the time of Israel being an apartheid state.
Right.
Right. If you want to know where real apartheid state is, where real apartheid is being practiced against the Palestinians, you can tell these to all the lunacy of the BDS movement. Try Jordan, like you mentioned before.
Yeah.
Why Jordan? Because over 1 million people living in Jordan have been claimed to be Palestinians, have been kept in refugee camps.
Yep.
Through the services of the United Nations for 70 years. Stateless. Stateless. That's true apartheid.
Sure.
Not allowed higher government jobs in Jordan.
Right.
Not allowed Jordanian citizen or higher education to a large degree.
Yep.
That is true apartheid. So these people that have their stickers on their shirt saying boycott Israel, why don't they have stickers saying boycott Jordan if they really care about the Palestinians? The truth is, they really don't care about the Palestinians.
Right.
They don't really give a damn about the Palestinians. They use the Palestinians as a club to beat Israel. And they do that because Israel is a Jewish state. And it's happening all the time. And because of this notion, this is where I came up with the book, The BDS for Idiots. There's a lot more examples like that.
Get that book. You need it. And read it and learn, because you're going to understand a lot of the so-called big complex issues. And I say complex because they're not complex. The truth is simple.
Yeah.
It's just people don't want to swallow the truth pill. They want to believe lies. They want to believe dreams. They want to believe that there are unicorns. But with all due respect, until you find a unicorn, these ideas of two states, Palestinian people, etc., these are unicorns. You're running after something that doesn't exist.
Daron, you talk about unicorns, and you mentioned two states, right?
Yes.
I talk about dead camels. You talk about unicorn. I call the two-state solution a dead camel. Okay. I have a cartoon, I'll try and find it for you, of two guys dragging a dead camel, and they're dying of thirst through an arid desert. This is the two-state solution. They've been dragging this dead camel for 50 years or more, and they're trying to reach an oasis, and they don't realize that the camel is dead.
Literally, that's the Middle Eastern version of what I just said. But
there's a serious thing behind it all, because look, when you have to understand the way that I envisioned this activism on behalf of the Palestinians, when you get below the surface, they really don't care about the Palestinians, and I have umpteen examples to prove it.
Sure.
So they don't do it. They're using it to club to hit Israel with.
Correct.
So why this obsession to hit Israel and use examples that they don't apply anywhere else in the world, whether it's apartheid, ethnic cleansing, all these lies that they don't apply to anywhere else in the world.
Right.
This double standard, this delegitimization, this demonization comes from one thing, that Israel is the nation home of the Jewish people, and that is anti-Semitism.
Exactly.
And an example of this is, for instance, I go back to Corbyn again, right? Some of the friends I have in London, for instance, who were demonstrating outside a hall where people were queuing up to go in to hear Jeremy Corbyn's speech. And outside also, there were other people from the pro-Palestinian, pro-Corbyn camp who were handing out flyers and leaflets and banners and flags and things like that. And one of those that were there were people from the Socialist Workers' Party that I mentioned before, the Communist Party, who were there actively supporting people and telling them they should vote for Corbyn, right, to do this. And they had a brochure in which they showed a Star of David, the Magen David of Israel, intertwined with a swastika.
Right.
That's imagery. This is anti-Semitism on the front page of a Socialist Workers' Party, a Communist Party, a Marxist Party, that is basically the birthplace of Corbyn's political ideology.
Right.
And they're helping drive him into power in Britain. And the subheading underneath was about Zionism, and they called Zionism as being anti-Semitic. It says Zionism, a racist, anti-Semitic and reactionary tool of imperialism. I mean, this is a socialist sort of language. So they're accusing Zionists of being anti-Semites.
That's insane.
I don't know if you know a psychologist or psychiatrist who is watching this, but there has to be some sort of explanation for the mindset of these people who can inflict their anti-Semitism onto the Jews themselves. But this is what's happening right now in Britain.
Okay, so for those of you who know about what I do with the Temple Mount Cry for Zion, you'll probably recognize the slogan that we use, which is Zionism without Zion is dead. Okay?
Right.
So Zionism, why do I say that? If Zionism has lost its focus, which is the Temple Mount, because the word Zion returned to Zion.
Right.
Okay, that's the very heart of the movement.
Right.
In other words, what is Zionism? Zionism is the Jewish people's awakening in the diaspora. As we're living in the diaspora, we wake up and realize, hey, we need to go back home. We're not home here in nations that have hosted us and have beaten us, have pogromed us, have tortured us, have done awful evils. There's only one solution: go back home. And that's what led to the modern movement of Zionism. And see, most of the world will say, well, no, it's because of the war and Holocaust, and everybody felt poor and sad for you, and No, that's not true. That is so not true. The Jewish Zionist movement predated the Holocaust. Thank God.
Yeah, I wanna
and that's what Zionism is. So to say that Zionism is anti-Semitic, talk about being stupid. Talk about being blind. And like you said, they need a psychological checkup. Just to show you, look at that. Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah. I mean, I can see, you can tell by looking at me, I'm not an Orthodox Jew, and I probably keep less mitzvahs than you do, probably. But I want to tell you, I have something that I feel that I'm connected with the Bible, even in contemporary times. For me, the Bible is my GPS system. I see modern miracles today. But if you throw away your GPS system, you're lost, and you're lost in the woods. And I see this happening with other people who've lost direction, including in Europe, including a lot of, unfortunately, sadly, some of the church. But as I said, my GPS system is what has been brought back down from from the Bible, from thousands of years ago
Yeah.
to today, and as relevant today as he was then. You mentioned about the Temple Mount. That's part of the GPS system. If you lose your compass, you don't know where you are.
Where
And
are you
despite the UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Science and Cultural Organization, which has redefined the Temple Mount as a Muslim holy site, Islamic
Right.
holy site,
Right.
you know, this, it's just absolutely, it's heathen, it's nonsensical. Unfortunately, I want to tell you two things. First of all, I find that the Christian supporters for Israel to be the most passionate and the most active supporters of all, far more than the Jewish people. There are groups of Jews who are very active and go into sort of
Right.
danger zones wherever they are,
Yeah.
including in places like London and on campuses in America, which have become danger zones. But
Yeah.
at the same time, Christians have been the most passionate supporters.
Yeah.
But there is a problem also in the Christian church, of a certain part of the Christian church who have adopted replacement theology.
Right. Right.
And I really believe that these
they bought
people...
into the politicization of their faith, because it actually can't be backed by the Bible, by the GPS.
Yeah, okay, but it comes out to the GPS system, you're right,
Yeah.
because I believe this, that quite frankly, putting it very oversimply, they believe that God abandoned the Jewish people and adopted the Christian people. For whatever reasons, we won't go into
Which
it
can't
right
be
now.
found in the Bible.
So it's a replacement theology,
Yeah.
right? I tell them, and I tell this, and I'm respected for it by a lot of the Christian groups and the Christian pro-Israel speakers that I speak to, that we don't believe in a God who changes his mind. And the Christians shouldn't believe in a God who changes his mind.
Right.
For one very good reason. Because a God who changes his mind once can change his mind again.
Absolutely.
And from my perspective, this is part of my GPS system, why I know I'm right, is if I look around the whole of the Middle East into Africa and I see the slaughter of Christians and the abandonment of Christianity in Europe and the adoption of Islam in Europe, I see a God who has, that they believe in, having abandoned the Christians and adopted Islam.
Sure.
So surely
Sure.
you cannot believe in a God who changes his mind, because I repeat again, a God who believes his mind once will change his mind again.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think the priests who believe that, for instance, who come to Bethlehem once a year to teach a pantomime called Christ at the Checkpoint,
Right.
have actually leading their flock into a very dangerous wood, dark place.
Sure.
I
Not to
don't-
mention, you're actually handicapping, and you will destroy the Christian community in Bethlehem/Nazareth by supporting that
exactly.
narrative.
But you know, there's some points I want to make about this Bethlehem issue, and why it proves these people to be so totally lost and wrong. And one is that they preach a message, and it's their words, not mine. They perceive Jesus as a Palestinian messenger. And I don't know if you know this, but I was the founder of the Netanya Terror Victims Organization. I recognize a Palestinian messenger when I see it by having lived through terrorism, Palestinian terrorism in my hometown here in Netanya, where Palestinian messengers often came with explosive belts strapped around their waist and blew up people at Passover, Pesach, in the Park Hotel, who blew up not once, but twice at the main shopping mall, almost killed my wife, who you met before, Carol, who blew people up the market, who had double suicide bombers at outside the Beit Lid. These were Palestinian messages that I recognize. It came to just 15-minute car ride down the road from Netanya. That is not the Jesus that even I as a Jew know of as a Jewish messenger. And the other point I want to make about this fallacy that's going on about Christ at the checkpoint in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
When Israel was in charge of Bethlehem, the population of Bethlehem was 80% Christian, most of them middle class, very thriving, prosperous people.
Yeah.
Since we moved out and handed it over to Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian Authority, the Christian population has fled, been intimidated by them. It's down to about 15% today. Now,
Wasn't
the
that
Christian...
part of the Oslo agreement? if I remember
Yes,
correctly?
yeah, possibly that we would hand it out. And
Yeah.
foolishly, this is what happens when Israel cedes territory to Palestinians.
Yeah.
However, the people who put on this Christ at the checkpoint fallacy
Yeah.
at Bethlehem blame it on the security wall that we put up there.
Right.
It's this apartheid wall.
Right, right.
But it's a very strange wall. It's really a mysterious wall
Yeah.
that in fact has created a ethnic cleansing of Christians from 80% down to 15%, and yet the Muslim population of the same town has almost doubled. I mean, has it got a revolving door where it says Christian out, Muslims in?
Yeah.
But this is why I said, if you really want to speak up on behalf of Israel,
Yeah.
don't even mention Israel. Listen to what they're saying against Israel and against Jews and really expose the fallacy and the nonsense of
Yeah.
their language.
In other words, follow the logic.
And,
It
but,
makes no logical sense.
but a lot
How
of,
can a wall, like you said, how can a wall,
yeah,
okay,
the Christian population went down because of this apartheid wall,
Yeah,
and
how-
yet the Muslim population decreased by about 50%.
do you understand what's happening? Here's what happened, and I'll
Incredible.
break it down for you very shortly here, is the simple truth is this. The PA took full control of Bethlehem, and ever since they did, they of course promoted Muslim, anti-Israel agenda and propaganda.
Against the Christian population,
And-
persecution
and
against
they
the Christian
persecuted,
population.
exactly. They persecuted the Christians that were living there. And you want to say, well, Doran, how do you know this? Because I spoke to the Arab Christians who told me that lived through it.
I spoke to the,
Not the ones that support, of course, this
Yeah.
organization that has these meetings, Christ at the checkpoint, all that,
The Kairos,
because they're politicized.
Samuel.
They get funding, they get support from outside, and of course, because those were the ones that survived this madness. And the reason why the population dropped was because they fled. They fled the persecution, and those who stayed, they supported that agenda because they realized if we support the Palestinian agenda, the anti-Israel agenda, and the Muslim agenda, then as a means of survival, right? We support. You know what I mean? We're gonna be more anti-Israel than them, and that way they maybe won't rape or kill our kids.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is what happens on the black market. The organs of children are being sold after the Palestinians get a hold of these young kids going to and for their home, their school, into home, and that's why now the Arab Christians who've remained, they actually have to escort their children so they don't get kidnapped and God knows what, sold as sex slaves on the black market, and that their organs are being sold on the black market. This is the truth of what's happening, and it's horrible. Nobody's speaking up for those Palestinians who had to live through that.
Well, you know, what we're talking about, what's happening again in Bethlehem, points back to when you expose anything to do with the Palestinian cause, even if it's dressed up as anti-Israel activism, at the heart of it, it's anti-Semitism, and this goes.
Sure.
This is what's going on in Bethlehem.
Yes.
Which brings me to the other book, which is Fighting Hamas, BDS and Anti-Semitism. I wrote this because I did a deep dive into research into everything that surrounds the Palestinians and the Palestinian cause, and at the heart of it is anti-Semitism. Let's take this Bethlehem story to its ultimate conclusion, right?
Right.
What they're doing here is supporting the Palestinians and blaming it on Israel.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're actually doing is expressing their anti-Semitism because it's wrapped up in the replacement theology, which is at its heart an anti-Semitic theocracy, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And therefore that's part of the anti-Semitism. But where a lot of your Christian viewers here and some of the leaders, the pastors or whatever, I give one example. I had a meeting with some of the Methodist pastors from Israel who were from Britain who were in Israel, and these were still very pro-Israel because it stems from their deep faith in the Wesley brothers, who were part of the Wesley brothers wrote psalms about the return of the Jews to Zion as part of their ultimate faith.
Yeah.
So I had a meeting with them, and I'm amazed at their courage Why courage? Because if they speak up against their leaders who believe in this replacement theology, they risk losing their jobs. They would risk losing their congregation, and
many have,
if they do that, they lose their homes because the homes belong there. So these are very brave to speak up against their leaders. And I asked them, this is anecdotal, I said, I held my breath, but then I said, could any of this be anti-Semitism? And they said, of course it's anti-Semitism from their leaders. They admitted it to me. So again, it comes back to anything that is happening with the pro-Palestinian cause is really at the deep heart a festering anti-Semitism.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, but yes, that's at the core of what I've seen when I've researched this. You can't avoid it. At the end of the day, it's anti-Semitic. And here's another example. I mean, back to the Christ at the Checkpoint, because I remember researching that, and I listened to a lot of what was spoken there to the speakers and all this. And the head of the Bible school, I forget his name now, the Arab man, relatively young man actually, he's not an old guy. He spoke at the convention, or at the conference there, and he made a statement that was chilling. He says, you know, all these Jews who are so worried about their Jewish ancestry, if you really were to do a DNA test, you would actually discover that the Palestinians are closer in DNA to the original Jews, back to Christ. You know, in other words, back to Second Temple period. And talk about anti-Semitic rhetoric. What he's basically saying is, me as a Arab Christian are more Jewish than the Jewish people. Can you imagine?
Not more,
but that's literally what he's saying. He's saying, no, if you do a DNA test, you'll discover we're the real Jews. And I thought to myself, this is literally what you said. It's replacement. It's saying, it's not even replacement. It's worse than replacement. It's not saying God chose us instead of you. It's saying we are the chosen people and God chose us instead of you. Like it's a double negative, so to speak. It's insane. These people believe this nonsense. And some of them might be Jewish, sure, sababa. You know, I have no problem with Palestinians who have had to be forced converted into Islam, and who knows to Christianity, and who knows and who knows. Sure, that happens. But to say that all the Palestinian people as a whole are closer to the Jewish roots than the Jews are, yeah, we just forgot our history, right?
We keep talking about the Palestinians, but that's a fairly recent phenomenon. Before that, they would go back less than 100 years, and they absolutely refused to call themselves Palestinians. That was for the Jews.
Correct.
The Palestinian Post was a Jewish newspaper, became the Jerusalem Post.
Right.
The Palestinian Electric Company was built by Pinchas Rothenberg, part of the Zionist enterprise.
Which is why many Arabs came
Palestine
here,
Bank. Palestine Bank became Bank Leumi. You know, Palestine, if you were a Palestinian before 47, 48, and even afterwards, you were Jewish. Palestine Football Club was a Jewish football club that was adopted by FIFA, the World Football Association at that time. So wherever you look, it was Palestinian at that time. The ones who fought alongside the British in the Palestine campaign were Palestinian Jews, under the leadership of Jabotinsky and Patterson, Colonel Patterson, who was the commander of the Palestinian Legion, the Jewish Legion. The Arabs at the time didn't want to fight for anybody at that time. They just stood aside and didn't want it. A lot of them were conscripted, as were some of the Palestinian Jews, by the Turks at that time, to try and fight for the Turks against the British or whatever. But none of them fought to liberate Palestine from the Ottoman Turks, because it was just a district at that time. The Jews did. The Jews did. And the Arabs did on the other side of the water, the River Jordan, under Lawrence, if the British gave them weapons and gold and money. And when they didn't give them the gold and money, they drifted off back into the desert, back to their tents. And this is what it needed. Lawrence, the famous Lawrence of Arabia, to recruit them, had to tell Faisal that, okay, the British are giving them money, bring your Bedouin back here and let's continue to campaign. With that money, they didn't do it. They didn't do it for any nationalistic cause. They didn't do it in the name of Palestine, for instance.
Right, right.
Right. This thing about we talk about Palestinians today, but it's basically a thing we only talk about since perhaps 1967, and it was really the leader of the so-called Palestinian movement at that time was an Egyptian,
right?
Yasser Arafat,
yep,
born in Egypt, so he wasn't even a Palestinian.
But he's the Palestinian leader. You know, we got to wrap this up here, and I just want to give those of you who don't understand probably the history, because you might just say, well, why are you guys bashing this whole Palestinian claim? What, you're saying that people don't have a right to self-determination, etc.? And that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is you need to understand the term Palestinian before you really understand who's against who, what's, you know.
Yep.
And so, to sum up really shortly is this: Palestinian comes from the term Palestine, which comes from the term that the Romans labeled the Judean district of the Roman Empire at the time.
As an insult.
As an insult. And we're sitting not too far away from where the mythical Palestinians actually came from, this term that they used, that the Romans used. And those were the Philistines, which, by the way, also are not a people group. Oh my gosh, isn't that shocking?
Right.
So Philistine is a Hebrew term for the peoples who came from the islands, off of Greece.
In the Mediterranean.
In the Mediterranean. And they were very fierce warriors. They would attack by sea, and they just, like, boom, there they are. And then they take over everything. And people were just in shock from this blitz, you know, attack from the sea, and they just take over. Which is why you had, if you look in your Bibles, you go and you see Philistine area along the coast there, which is the modern exact same region of the Gaza Strip, ironically, but not related at all. So those Philistines, which, by the way, where does the term come from? It's a Hebrew term, like I said, meaning the Plishtim, those who invade. They invaded from the sea, so we labeled them the invaders.
Yeah.
Ironically, later on, the Arabs, who came here because of the Jewish entrepreneurial building of vineyards, of power plants, and you name it, there was an industry that came to life here as the Zionist movement was revived over 200 years ago. And so these Arabs came from all over the region, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, you name it. They came from all these, and they were poor, but they came here because they wanted to find, like the Americans that went west, they wanted to find gold. They wanted to basically make a better life. So they came to where there was opportunity. So they came here. They're not originally from here. Yeah. Originally. They came because of Jews. But then that's why they did not want to adopt a name that was foreign. Because, like, who are these Philistines? There are no Philistines or Palestinians. There are no such thing. Let the Jews that want to adopt that label that the imperialists give them, let them adopt it. We're Arabs. Hence, today, here's the irony. When did the term now become politicized in modern terms? 1964. Mr. Yasser Arafat, the Egyptian, says, I'm the representative of the Palestinian people. He can't even say it because, by the way, in Arabic, there is no P.
Yeah.
Ask any Arab to say pita and hummus, and he's going to say bita and hummus. And we joke about it here in Israel because it's like, haha, they can't say P. But it's just a linguistic thing. They can't even call themselves Palestinian because it comes from Rome, because it comes from the Hebrew of the invaders. So they want to call themselves invaders. Go be it. You're an invader. Congratulations. You're right. You're invading my land.
but another giveaway, if you have Palestinian families, you look at their name, and their name is a giveaway. For instance, Al-Masri, which is the main tribe in Shechem, Nablus, for instance, Al-Masri in Egypt, in Arabic is the Egyptian. And Erekat is from Iraq, and Tobolsky is Tripoli, and a lot of the names say where they came from. So why are they here? They were attracted by two things. Basically, the Zionist enterprise, when the Jews here and started putting down roots and putting in moshavim and kibbutzim and bit of industry in the land over here, they came here, they were migrants, economic migrants, drawn by that, and also later also by the British who came here as well. So they came in from outside of the region, outside the areas, Syria, Iraq and other places, in order to become migrants and to put down roots over here.
And then secondly, or thirdly maybe, because of the wars. They were told by their Arab, where they were from the Arab countries they came from, we're going to go invade Palestine and we're going to liberate it. And you who don't have any home or opportunity here, you're going to take Jewish homes. You're going to take their wealth, and you're going to have status.
But that was what this is basically. Where they talk, if they talk about this thing about the Palestinian refugees, they left, and you can Google it, whatever. They left at the order of the Arab High Command. For the Arabs move out over here, we're coming to invade, 5 Arab armies are going to drive the Jews into the street, and then you can come back and you can claim whatever you want.
Right.
So get out of the way, we're going to invade.
Right.
So they left for safety.
Okay, so
they left for safety.
To be confused, those who were here.
They were here
pre-48 because of Jewish industry, because of other reasons. Looking for opportunity.
And they estimate
they were told by the Arab
there were somewhere between about 450, 550 so refugees of Arabs were left by the order of the Arab High Command.
Right.
And at a similar time, going into the 50s, there were about 800, 850 Jews who were expelled from Arab lands because of the shame of the Arabs having lost the war, and they wanted to take their vengeance out on the Jews. They wanted to, they were invading the land over here to drive not the Israelis into sea, but the Jews into the sea.
Correct.
They lost that battle. They did win some territory. For instance, Jordan took most of Judea and Samaria up till 1967, when they wanted to attack again. But at the same time, while this was going on, they were driving, because the shame of having lost against the Jews, they expelled the Jews. They kicked them out of these lands, and they should be here now as refugees, because like you said, you've still got Palestinian refugees in Syria, Palestinian refugees in Jordan. By the way, Doron, your listeners ought to know the most iniquitous Palestinian refugee camps are just outside Ramallah, under the full authority of the Palestinian Authority. Doron, how is it possible that you can be a Palestinian refugee when you're living under the governing of the Palestinian Authority? What's that about?
Only in a world that doesn't care about the facts.
What's that about?
Yep.
You know what it's about? They're keeping them in refugee status for 80 years till the time where they can take over the land of Israel and say, now you can come back and take some of the stuff from the Jews.
Correct. And it's sad.
That's what it's about.
It's very sad, because there are many Palestinians in the Palestinian controlled areas that, yes, do live under extreme poverty. You look at the Gaza Strip, you look in different parts of Judea, Samaria, where there are Palestinian communities, and it's disgusting. I mean, the type of conditions they live under, while at the same time, and by the way, I invite you to go to the Mountain of Blessing, Har Bracha community, and go to Mount Gerizim, where the, talk about indigenous groups and so on. You have the Samaritan community that lives there on the mountaintop, and just off the Samaritan community, there's an overlook where you can look into what you guys call in the news Nablus, which, by the way, is, again, talk about names and words, Naples, because the Romans saw it and said it looks like Naples. We call it Naples, and because they can't say P, they call it Nablus.
Nablus.
Back to the whole linguistic thing, but Nablus is actually Shechem. So when you look over Shechem, okay, the biblical town of Shechem, okay, you'll notice it's beautifully built up and huge, massive houses and all that. But then you'll notice the UNRWA school is, the United Nations school, it's the poor Balata district there that just looks like an armpit of a place. Like, who wants to live there?
Right.
But people are forced to live there to support this narrative against Israel, that Israel's causing this, but they're under PA control, not Israeli control. And what's to prevent them from going here to here? And I'm talking a few hundred meters. A few hundred meters. Why would you live in the slums when you could just go right? Well, because somebody's prevented you from opportunity.
You should go.
And who's that somebody? And that somebody, by the way, here's another insane fact. You might say, well, the Palestinian Authority doesn't have money. Really? They received 25 times the amount of money that went in to rebuild Europe after World War II.
Yeah.
25 multiplications of 25 times.
Yeah, but where's it gone to?
Can you imagine? They could have rebuilt themselves, industries, you name it,
Yeah.
high tech.
Right.
They could have tapped into where you're here in the Silicon Valley of Israel, tapped into, cooperated with.
Yeah.
They could have made an amazing.
You go. Look, you mentioned about the homes and everything. If you're close to the elite in the Palestinian Authority, I would advise viewers go Google Rawabi, which is a new township outside of Ramallah. Yeah. This is for the upper and middle class Palestinians who are close to the corrupt kleptocracy of the Palestinian Authority. Yeah. You can see where the money goes to those people. It goes to their terrorists, 350 million.
Yep. Paychecks
dollars
for terrorists.
Going to the terrorists and the terrorist families.
Yep.
But the rest of the people are going poor.
Yep.
This is so-called Palestinian economy, which is a shame. I mean, Doran is here as an Israeli Jew. I'm here as an Israeli Jew, and it's a crime. It's a human rights crime that has not been taken up, and it's it's part of the hypocrisy of the BDS movement and the pro-Palestinian message. They ignore this. They ignore the human rights crimes. Yeah. Just as an extension of your wrapping up, I wanted to make a link. I wanted to make a link actually to what's happening in Britain. We talked about Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party that is poised to be the next government in Great Britain. Yeah. They had an annual general conference, by the way, last September, and I asked my audiences in England if they ever saw any of the British flags, the Union Jacks, being flown by this patriotic British political party. But the halls were full of Palestinian flags. Palestinian, hall after hall. And they made a vote on their top 10 policies going forward to the next election. Which are their priorities? Yeah. And out of the priorities, Palestine was number 4. It was ahead of Brexit. Here's all the Palestinian flags. This is the Labour Party.
So again, this is
the future Britain. This isn't some crazy right-wing or neo-Nazi party or anti-Jewish. It is anti-Jewish. This is the Labour Party. This is what it become. Yeah. But I want to come up to the link with America here in a minute. They made their top 10 priorities going forward to an election. Palestine was number 4. It was ahead of Brexit. I mean, it's the whole thing that's obsessing Britain right now. Right. Do we going out of Europe or not? But even Palestine was ahead of it. It was ahead of the welfare system. It was against the NHS, which is the national hospital system. It was against the local government funding, social welfare. It was more than social welfare and the health service together. And what's gone mad, the obsession in the Labour Party. Yeah. And don't forget, a lot of these people are trade union workers or something who are voting more on the Palestinian issue than their own for personal and collective interests. They're obsessed with this Israel Jew hatred. Where's the connection?
That's what it is.
I posed at this talk, you may remember, you want to talk a shocking thing. Can you imagine a world in which, after the next election in Great Britain and the next election in America, that you have a Corbyn-led Labour government in charge of Britain, and you have Democrats with the hard left, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic part of the Democratic Party in America, that they take the White House and control the Senate, and have America come into a coalition with an anti-Semitic, anti-Israel British government? Where would Israel stand with there? Where would the Jews of America or Israel be there? Where do we go to for shelter? Yeah. Israel will remain solid, would remain economically sound and militarily sound. But I fear for the future of Britain, and I fear for the future the way that America is going right now. Yeah. I only hope that the Americans and the British will come to their senses before the elections.
Well, you just see in the States now with these pro-Palestinian women here that have been elected into the
House of Representatives.
House of Representatives.
Yeah.
That's chilling. The fact that one of them was draped in a Palestinian flag.
Rashida Tlaib.
Rather than an American flag. I'm sorry, I thought you were in America. I thought you're here to represent the American people.
And the other one,
I don't think the American people, neither the British, are draping themselves in Palestinian flags. They care about Britain. They care about America. But apparently these people have a much more important and more pressing issue than their own, so to speak, right?
Rashida Tlaib said that
they don't represent America, by the way, just in case you're wondering. They don't represent America, and as Americans, you should protest for them to get kicked out.
Unfortunately, we can suggest that they don't represent America, but they are there representing their people.
Who's her people?
Rashida Tlaib said she is going to lead a visit of Congress people to come to Palestine. She said that. She wants to see, she said they've had enough of AIPAC, of bringing people to a Jewish organized 5-star trip to Israel, to the Jewish state. She wants to bring people to see the human rights abuses in Palestine. And I wrote about this. I wrote about this. I said, I think she's absolutely right.
Me too.
I think she should bring them to visit Issam Aikim, who received a life sentence by a Palestinian court. He's a Palestinian. He happens to be a Palestinian American, which is a double reason for them to visit him in prison, in the Palestinian region.
Exactly.
He received a sentence of life imprisonment with hard labor. What was his crime? He had a property in Jerusalem that he sold to a Jew. That is a crime that gave this Palestinian American a life sentence with hard labor in a Palestinian prison by the Palestinians. Is that not anti-Semitic? Is that not democratic? Is not an abuse of human rights against the Palestinian? Has Rashida Tlaib ever spoken up about it? No. Neither will she take them to Jericho, where they have 2 detention camps, which according to Human Rights Watch, 28 Palestinians who protested the corrupt reign of Mahmoud Abbas were sentenced to prison, and in this prison, according to the Human Rights Watch, were suffering from torture by the Palestinian jailers. Human rights against the Palestinians. Have these new Palestinian representatives in the House of Representatives of America ever spoken up about this? No.
And they won't.
And they won't.
Because it doesn't attack Israel.
So this is the way, and the strange disconnect is what is happening in Britain and what is happening in America is against what is happening in the rest of Europe. Right. Who is moving from the left to center-right, and even perhaps even further than the center-right, because they are fed up with the false policies and the lies of the people who are there governing them. In the European case, it's the unelected bureaucrats of Brussels, and they're moving away from this. So while this is going on, you have a reverse going on, apparently in Britain and also in America.
Yeah. So in other words, what's happening, just to kind of explain that a little bit, is in Europe you have countries that are going back to their Christian roots, and they're saying, listen, France, England, if they want to deny their Christian roots and say that's passé, that's old school, we don't believe in the Bible, we don't believe in God, we don't give a flip. We believe in ourselves, we believe in our ideals, we believe in the Palestinian cause, we believe in whatever, anything but God. Those nations are falling apart. By the way, if you haven't noticed, look at the rioting on the streets in France. Look at the massive insanities happening in England as well, and you get an idea of what you get for adopting such ideas. While at the same time, if you look at, for example, Hungary, they've adopted a policy that's pro-family, that has that's coming against the homosexual movement, and saying we don't support homosexualism, or all these, you know, I forget all these alphabetic soup. But basically what they're saying is, to us, a marriage is between a man and a woman. And that's what we believe. We believe in biblical values. We believe in supporting our people. We believe in defending our Christian faith from the Islamic faith that's trying to invade us. So no, we don't want any...
believe in home, community and faith.
Yeah. To summarize, exactly.
Yeah.
Summarize.
Yeah.
Now these people are being labeled as fascist, as racist, and all this. Listen, if you speak to any Muslim, he believes in the exact same values, more or less. He believes in family, but just that his values are Islamic. These persons' values are Christian. So why is the Christian's values, when it's come from a Christian perspective, is it, you know, racist and whatever, and white supremacist and all these stupid labels? They're just defending their right to be who they are. And if you think that they're extreme, then take a good look at Switzerland. Oh my gosh, I brought up Switzerland. The most quiet, you never noticed their success. You never noticed how they defend themselves. Exactly, because Switzerland is smart. Switzerland knows what not to say to the public. But if you look at the policies of Switzerland, they don't take refugees. They defend their citizens. They let their citizens arm themselves. By the way, all the policies that the far left are anti. And they're succeeding.
And patriotic to your country.
And patriotic to your country. Which, by the way, I take my hat off to all those countries who are pro their nationalism. Your own nation. Be proud of your culture. Your Swiss cheese, or whatever. And if the Muslims want to bring in their culture, with all due respect, create another nation that's Islamic in Europe if you want. And maybe the Europeans can figure out an area for them to do that and have refugees there and all of the benefits and everything. Don't let your cultures fall to these ideals of this la-la land of we can all be happy and we can all work together, because guess what? History has proven Christianity, Islam, Judaism doesn't ever always get along, if ever. Except for, by the way, only here in the Middle East, only here in Israel is there such of a kind of a utopic reality happening. And that's just because Israel is unique. Israel is different, and that's why I'm proud to be Israeli. That's why I'm proud to be part of this nation that supports the Bedouins' rights, that supports the Druze rights. Oh, by the way, talk about minorities. The Druze are the only nation group in the whole of the Middle East who have been chased their whole existence up until Israel was founded as a state. Now they're no longer chased. They have made this their homeland. They're proud to be. They have their own culture. They have their own religion. They have their own communities, and they're happy. And we're happy to have them part of our country.
You can talk about the Arameans, for instance, here in Israel, and so on.
So, at any rate, so we got to wrap this up because it's been long. But Barry, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
For this.
Thanks for coming visit me. Great to have you.
I think you guys have gotten a powerhouse from this guy. Like I said, he knows his stuff. He has wonderful books. Go online, look up Barry Shaw, look up every book, and get it, because you're going to learn a lot from his books. You've done really good research. It's not, I don't think it's favoritism, to be honest. No,
it's very factual. Anecdotes are not from me, it's from the people who make out the case for me in the aim of the book itself.
And so that's why I like your worldview. It's not, you know, it's not like you're working with not just Jewish religious groups.
No.
Christians.
No, absolutely,
You know. And that's unique. And so I hope you enjoyed his view.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Daron.